In 2020, asked 7 years after the series ended, Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated showrunner and producer Tony Cervoni confirmed something fans of the show already knew. Velma was queer. In an Instagram post after the initial confirmation went viral, Tony would write this: "I obviously don't represent every version of Velma Dinkley, but I am one of the key people that represents this one. We made our intentions as clear as we could 10 years ago. Most of our fans got it. To those that didn't, I suggest you look closer. There's no new news here." This is the story of how Velma publicly became known as canonically gay outside of just fan theory, and how the course of history changed 7 years late. I'm Nate, and this is Scooby-Topia Episode 7, Velma's Queer Evolution. Happy Pride Month, everybody!
The show originally, it was supposed to be marketed to older kids, but the show itself was supposed to be scary. That was one of the main things that Sam told me in the beginning, was they really wanted it to be scary. They wanted a legitimately scary Scooby-Doo show.
If you're looking for just the recap and breakdown of Velma's character arc, feel free to skip to that chapter in the index. For everyone else, let's break down the history for important historical context. On April 5th, 2010, Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated held its series premiere on Cartoon Network. At the time, it would be overlooked and written off by many initially, from people disliking the distinctive art style, not liking Velma and Shaggy now being in a relationship leaning towards soap opera, how much Scooby talked now, or a myriad of other reasons. But for those who stuck around until the series finale aired April 5th, 2013, exactly 3 years later, there was a different opinion. The series would ultimately be strung around by Cartoon Network at the end, randomly pulling it from the schedule 13 times. Between the airing of Season 2 episodes 15 and 16, 7 months had passed. Many episodes had leaked online after airing in other countries. Episodes 16 and 17 would both air the same day, and the 9 remaining episodes would be burned off with a new episode a day early in the morning when nobody would be watching and with little to no promotion to let people know about it. Behind the scenes, Cartoon Network never liked the series. From it being too weird, the serious dark tone full of horror influence, and the continuity-driven serialized nature of the series, and being a Warner Brothers series and not their own original, did everything they could to tank this series in favor of their own shows like Adventure Time. The promotion they would do for the series would intentionally sabotage it, doing things like giving away the villains. The network's issues would ensure the next franchise entry, Be Cool Scooby-Doo, would exclusively be a goofy comedy with no running story to keep up with. But despite the network trying to bury the series, word of mouth would propel it, especially after becoming available for streaming on Netflix, and would go on to become a cult classic considered by many to be one of the best incarnations, if not the best, of the Scooby-Doo franchise to this day. The series would be heavily praised for being very binge-worthy. It had an actual overarching plot that continued and would build across every episode so you could never miss one. It had stakes where important characters would die, and other dark themes never explored before in Scooby-Doo's history like this. The deeper explorations of the characters saw changes such as Fred intentionally being written as autistic, his traps being his special interest, his little hyperfixation.
You know, Fred in our version of Mystery Incorporated, Fred is slightly on the spectrum, you know, with his obsession with traps and his inability to sort of read human emotions properly. So again, we never said this in the series, but this was what was in our minds.
But what really caught people off guard, especially young queer fans like myself, was Velma's evolution. Velma's relationship with Shaggy that turned people off initially with its soap opera nature would slowly turn to Velma exploring herself, her confused feelings and actions changing into something new as she became friends with a girl named Varcie, aka Hot Dog Water, voiced by Linda Cardellini, who portrayed Velma in the live-action films, until it slowly became clear that the two had feelings for each other. By the end of the series, it was very obvious to queer audiences that these two were in love, and in the final scene, that the two were a couple. We're so used to having to read between the lines when we can't be talked about out loud, and these lines were as clear as it gets, especially before Steven Universe would come along and change things. I was there in the trenches every week on Tumblr up to the end in 2013, running a blog dedicated to the series just to make sure people knew when the new episodes would air, and I saw every little crumb drop, every beautiful discussion. All of us knew that this Velma was queer, even if everyone else might have missed it. Velma being perceived as queer wasn't a new concept. Queer audiences that grew up with the character had been claiming her as their own for decades. From her lack of interest in boys, the way she dressed being less feminine, especially in contrast to Daphne, her physical strength, even her short hair. Velma's tomboyish nature was a queer awakening for many people, and the way she comes off falls easily into queer coding regardless of the intent in 1969. In 2002, the final product for the live-action film Scooby-Doo was very different from the original draft written by James Gunn. Best known these days for writing and directing Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy films or DC's The Suicide Squad, his original script openly presented Linda Cardellini's Velma as a lesbian, including an on-screen kiss with Sarah Michelle Gellar's Daphne. As the studio began to shy away from aiming the film at adults, Velma's queerness became more and more watered down until she effectively only had a male love interest, and in the sequel, a boyfriend. In some of the deleted scenes, however, you can still see a brief glimpse of what remained. In this one, Velma blatantly sings the song Can't Take My Eyes Off You directly to Daphne along with some suggestive dance moves.
Let me love you. You're just too good to be true.
The removal of the intentional queerness would, however, not stop young queer audiences from yet again attaching to this iteration of the character. Though Velma would end up with Seth Green in the 2004 sequel, she still never had a love interest in any TV series before or after this, so her legacy as only being somewhat coded still seemed to end there. Until 2010, when Mystery Incorporated debuted, and suddenly she was dating Shaggy, making the gay Velma argument seemingly irrelevant. However, behind the scenes, much like James Gunn, the creative staff had some very different ideas about what we seemingly were getting. Velma's voice actor Mindy Cohn didn't like Velma's attitude or how she was treating Shaggy any more than audiences did, and she was confused about what Velma Velma was going through. The staff wanted this, however, because their version of Velma was confused too. They simply asked Minnie to trust that they knew where they were taking her, and she let them guide Velma toward a very new journey. What Velma was actually experiencing was the slow realization that her relationship with Shaggy and how he made her feel wasn't just because he wasn't the right person for her, it was because she didn't like boys. As the show went on, more hints would be dropped until the introduction of Marcie, and the more time Velma would spend with her, the more they would fall for each other. Having Marcie be voiced by Linda Cardellini is genius casting, given her own take on Velma had been written as queer only to be erased. The staff knew they would never be allowed to say any of this out loud on the show during this period, or even in interviews, so they simply kept quiet and let their plan play out over the course of the series, hoping fans would see it themselves. They would keep quiet, that is, until Tony Cervoni would confirm in 2020 that this was fact. Truly what was written into the show, not fans starved for representation reading into things. In another post he would write, "If you follow the entire Marcie arc, it seems as clear as we can make it 10 years ago. I don't think Marcie and Velma had time to act on their feelings during the main timeline, but post-reset, they are a couple. You cannot like it, but this was our intention." Later that same year, Mitch Watson, one of the other main producers and head writers, would go on the 12th episode of the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo podcast and talk about it further.
It was really funny. The most pushback we got, I think, in the entire series from the fans was all about Velma. It was about how we were portraying Velma. And I would always respond, if anybody interviewed me, I would always go like, you don't quite see the whole picture of what we're doing with Velma, but when you see the whole picture, I think you're going to appreciate what we were doing. We got a ton of feedback on Velma for the way that she was acting towards Shaggy and the fact that we were actually showing them having a relationship. And then people were saying, oh, I don't like the way Velma was acting towards Shaggy. And we just held our tongues because we knew what we were doing and we knew it was going to pay off somewhere down the line in the second season. But we weren't allowed to talk about it really because we were setting up Velma to be a character who was sort of kind of figuring out her own sexuality and coming to grips with the fact that, you know, that she's gay. And part of that was to show her reactions to Shaggy and how he wasn't giving her what she felt she needed. And then ultimately she realizes it's not so much to be about Shaggy, it's more about her. I mean, she was looking in the wrong place. So then we have there's a mermaid episode and then that's where she really gets the first inkling that, oh, wait a minute, maybe guys are not what I'm looking for. And then we introduced hot dog water. And then by the end of the series, we were hoping that it would be pretty clear that if the show goes on or whatever happens in their lives, that hot dog water and Velma are together, have found each other. And then so Velma is finally content with who she is. And so we knew that going all the way through, but we sort of had to endure all the attacks because we weren't allowed to talk about it. It was not something there was no way at that time, because this was like I said, 10 years ago or so, they were not going to let's portray Velma as gay, period. So we had to figure out a different way to do it. And some people got it and some people didn't. To me, it's obvious if you actually, I guess it's obvious if you're looking for it. And to us, it was very obvious, especially after the mermaid episode. And then also the final shots of Velma and hot dog water on the bed together at the end. To us, it was like crystal clear. My response is like, come on, really? I think now if you did it, it would almost be like, of course, and expected and encouraged. 10 years ago, even then, you couldn't do that kind of thing. So a lot of what we did on Mystery Incorporated was we would just go through the blogs and the Reddit posts and anything else to see what fans were saying. There were things that ended up in the show that were based on theories that fans had, which was a lot of fun for us. So we were very well aware of what was going on in terms of how people felt about Velma being gay or not gay or da-da-da-da. We just sort of ignored it. We just kind of ignored it. I think we got a big chuckle out of it because we knew what we were doing and we were doing it from the very, very start. And once we started doing it, there was no going back. And we were pretty happy with the decisions we've made. So it was alternately like annoying that no one was sort of getting it, but also very, very fun to see how angry people would get with each other. And I think that's why Tony finally said, look, it's been 10 years. She's not bi, okay? She's gay, all right? And so he wanted to make that point. And then he immediately texted me after he did it. And he said, dude, just so you know, Velma is gay is trending on Twitter. I'm like, what? So that cat out of the bag. And he's like, well, I posted this thing. I'm like, all right, cool. Finally. I was wondering when that would finally come out.
And so the world finally knew. The Velma Dinkley of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated was canonically a lesbian. There were no ifs, ands, or buts. That was the truth. But because much of the mainstream public hadn't watched the series, or if they hadn't delved this deep into it, it left many puzzled or prone to say something completely off about what they heard. To some of the public, the character of Velma in general is gay, not the Velma Mystery Incorporated. Consequently, the reaction to hearing Velma was gay, which trended on Twitter and became a huge news piece, would lead to Warner Brothers finally seeing the potential in Velma's queer audience. In 2021, they would announce the first ever adult animated Scooby-Doo spin-off series had been greenlit for HBO Max, a series exclusively about Velma. Think HBO Max's Harley Quinn series. As of this upload, the series hasn't come out yet, unlike Velma, but has already started a ton of controversy and divided the Scooby-Doo fanbase. There's so many adult Scooby fans upset that there's a series aimed at them and not kids. Sure, they just announced a series aimed at preschool children too, but how will will the kids survive knowing there's an adult Scooby series they can't watch? Won't someone think of the children? But regardless of how that series turns out or how it's received in the future, a change has finally occurred for the character. And yet for much of the public, so many would still remain unaware of what started the chain. They had no idea about Marcy Fleech, about Velma's self-discovery arc, or the trials and tribulations the staff of Mr. Incorporated went through just to produce the series and get it out there against a network that didn't want it. That's where this video comes in, because if you're watching this, now you know too. Go ahead and settle in. If you're new to the world of Mr. Incorporated and are now interested in seeing a breakdown of what you've heard about Velma in the series, or just want a refresher of Velma's arcs we've been discussing already, it's time to dive deep and really explore the life and times of Velma Dinkley, gay icon, to be able to properly understand what made this series and character portrayal so impactful for so many. Obviously, there are series-wide spoilers from this point, though I tried to contain it as much as possible, so that's your final warning. Let's obviously start in the first season. Velma's story begins in the first episode as she and Shaggy are in a secret relationship, with her asking him why he didn't text while she waited up for him. She accepts his apology and goes in for a kiss, but he doesn't want to show PDA in case Scooby finds out. He says he's waiting for the right time, and Velma tries to get him to do it now when they're interrupted. Velma tries to make another move later, but Shaggy freaks out and runs away. Daphne catches on and asks if there's anything between them, but an annoyed Velma asks why anything would ever be happening between them. As the gang split up later, Velma romantically asks Shaggy if he wants to go clue hunting with her, but he turns her down again because Scooby's around. Velma tells him they need to talk, but he brushes her off and she walks away. He chases asking what he did, and she says nothing. Realizing later that they're stuck in Gatorsburg all night, Velma tries to make another move, but Scooby comes between them again. Velma is doing her eyelashes as Daphne notices her hair is slightly different as well. She leaves the room making an excuse, though Daphne's onto her. She bumps into Shaggy and asks if he was sneaking out to see her, and he lies, saying yes, but he has to check on Scooby first. Velma tells him Scooby is fine and pulls him in. With them all alone, Velma makes her moves on a terrified Shaggy. The two are about to finally kiss when Scooby bursts in and jumps on Shaggy. Velma is almost taken by the Gator people, but Shaggy pulls her out and they have a moment. A lightning flash terrifies Scooby, but Velma takes Shaggy's hand as they look into each other's eyes. When their plans at Skipper Shelton's don't plan out, Velma offers to take Shaggy back to her place where she has plenty of snacks, but he says he and Scooby have a whole map of backups tattooed on Scooby's tongue. Discovering a secret cave, Velma says this could be their new secret hangout. Back at Skipper's as Shaggy orders a bunch of junk food, Velma reminds him he told her he'd eat more healthy, to the horror of Scooby. As he still shows interest in food, she scowls at him and walks away disapprovingly. Sat together, Velma sees her opportunity and cuddles up to Shaggy, but Scooby breaks between them again. With Daphne not getting anywhere with Fred either, she and Velma decide to leave. Velma asks her about boy advice, but she thinks she's asking about Fred. Velma asks for clarification about what to do with boys, but she's taken before she gets an answer. Like later, Velma reminds Shaggy he wouldn't say like so much because it makes him sound ignorant, and he says he forgot, disappointing her again. He still keeps doing it however, so she gives him a rubber band and tells him to snap it on his wrist every time he does it. She then gives him a fashion magazine to pick out new pants because he promised to care more about his appearance. But he likes his current pants, so she tells him she'll pick them out for him. Later, Shaggy wears them around, though they're a little tight. Shaggy eventually takes Velma aside, standing up for himself and telling her to take the pants back, and the two join the others in dancing. During a late night hangout, Velma is bored as Shaggy and Scooby have a good time excluding her. Shaggy gets rid of Scooby so he can ask what's wrong, and Velma scoots over, reminding him it's their 1-month anniversary soon. She wants their official coming out to be at prom and then to celebrate alone without Scooby. She makes sure to remind him to call the limo guy later. In the graveyard, she asks how it's going with the prom tickets, but he forgot about them as well as everything else.
Do you not want to go to the prom with me? If you don't want to go, just tell me. I'll understand.
Oh, what a relief, because I don't...
What? Why? I don't believe this. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it!
Velma, stop breaking the cemetery!
He tells her he was just kidding, and she jumps into his arms. She gets herself all ready for the big night, though she still adds her sweater back on top of her dress. She makes her way to Shaggy's to pick him up, and they run off without Scooby. Unfortunately, their prom night ends up ruined by another baddie, disappointing her expectations. At the Royal Knights Fair, Velma makes a move on Shaggy again, but he says she can only join if she wears a pirate costume. Later, she tries to ask him if he'll join her in searching for clues, but to her annoyance, he and Scooby get wrapped up again.
Is it me? What am I, radioactive?
Don't be too hard on yourself, Velma. You're quite pleasant when you aren't trying to be smarter than everyone else.
But I really care about him, and I want him to care about me.
It'll happen, sweetheart. And if it doesn't, Mommy will mix him up a special drink of poisoned mushrooms and wormwood.
The two of them split off again without her, and Daphne notices something's wrong, so she asks. Velma admits she and Shaggy are a thing to her delight, but realizes something's wrong. Velma explains how she feels with how all over the place their relationship has been. Daphne gets Fred to join in, though he says they already have an awesome relationship with the 5 of them anyway. Shaggy gets abducted, and as Velma cradles his parrot, Scooby gets jealous and they fight over it. They tear it apart, and she says she misses him too. With Shaggy safe later, Daphne tells Velma to just trust her heart. In the garden, Scooby thinks he hears Shaggy getting attacked, but when he goes in to save him, he runs into he and Velma making out.
Are you cheating on me?
Shaggy tries to get out of it, saying he cares for both of them equally, which just makes things worse, so she forces Shaggy to come clean. In the van, things are awkward as they all stop speaking. Their adult friend Angel Dynamite realizes something's wrong, and Velma comes to the conclusion that they have to clean up their emotional mess before they can go back to being a team. Fred gets Sheriff Stone to try and give them advice to no avail, so Velma calls Shaggy out as the source of their problem. She forces Shaggy to choose between the two of them, but Fred distracts. After everything, Velma forces Shaggy again to make a decision, but he runs off to avoid it. Velma tries to spice things up for aboard Shaggy later, but Scooby interrupts as always, annoying her, so she tries to force him to choose again, but something comes up. up. As Jason, a boy with a crush on her, shows up, Shaggy tells him she has other plans and takes her hand, leading them away to her amazement. Though as she compliments him, he still walks off without her to get some food. Shaggy is later heartbroken over Scooby's arrest and she tries to comfort him, though she says maybe it's time to move on. To try and make him feel better, she scarfs down some food like Scooby, but it just makes things more awkward. After finding out Jason's mom was attacking them because they weren't treating him nicer, Velma makes it clear to him that the two of them were never going to be a couple. She says they can still be friends though. After seeing that, Shaggy realizes it's best to be clear, and came to a conclusion after being away from Scooby. He tells her he's not ready for a girlfriend yet, and asks to just be friends too.
Are you whack?
But she's furious over the boy she loves choosing a dog over her, of course. Daphne comforts her as she breaks down in tears. Still hoping to impress him later, Velma shows off her new bikini, though he can't see anything under her sweater. Fred embarrasses her, though she says she doesn't care about what he thinks, looking at Shaggy. That night, Velma refuses to join the others if Shaggy's going to come. Shaggy agrees splitting up is a good idea, which Velma says he's already made perfectly clear. Daphne takes her back to her place for pedicures where she gives her best boy advice about how stupid they are, always making the worst choice, which Velma finds depressing. Velma and Shaggy get paired up again and they both object, making her realize that they might not be a team anymore. With things awkward, they later just go their separate ways. On another case, Velma notices Shaggy is missing and Scooby is shocked she cares. She says she can't kid herself and it's still like he's a part of her. Shaggy is later happy to have time alone with his two best buds, while Daphne and Fred are off on a date, though Velma tells him he's lost arm around the shoulders privileges. Fed up with the boys, she and Daphne ditch them for a monstrous biker gang. She takes the opportunity to vent her feelings over a campfire, and one of the bikers asks if she believes in love at first sight. Velma later shows off her new vest to Shaggy. Velma and Scooby unfortunately get abducted by a different biker trying to frame the others, who forces her to help him using her computer knowledge or else he lets Scooby die. Velma realizes this is her chance to get Shaggy back if she just refuses and lets Scooby die, but she assures him she would never do that or let anyone hurt him, though she still thought of it, right? Done with her, Velma is pushed off a cliff, saved by Scooby, and they break free. As the mysterious Aphrodite is putting love spells on everyone, we are finally introduced to a girl named Hot Dog Water, aka Varcie Fleech. Unfortunately, Aphrodite gets Shaggy, who sets his sights on Velma as the two grab hands and dance around, spreading the love. Under the influence, Shaggy and Velma enjoy a romantic date at the beach, and they share a moment over the unhealthy snack. With the help of the mysterious Professor Pericles, Scooby frees them of the love juice, finally making for an awkward wake-up. Alone again later, the two agree to just ignore what happened, though Velma is still obviously disappointed. Velma later introduces the new exchange student, Miley, who immediately has a crush on Shaggy. Velma reveals she was exchanged for Varcie.
Oh boy. There isn't gluten in these noodles, is there? Probably should have told you. I have a major gluten intolerance.
Miley is excited to spend time with Shaggy, but Velma pulls him aside and says he has to stop spending time with her.
The last time you were that polite to me, I spent a month locked in my bedroom listening to, now that's what I call breakup song 16.
Back at her place, Velma warns Miley to stay away from Shaggy because he has dog issues. After Miley leaves for home again, Shaggy finally knows what being heartbroken feels like, so an understanding Velma tells him how much she'd like it if she was surprised by someone seeing her off on a plane, which he thanks her for. After realizing she never cared, Velma tells her Shaggy is too good for her anyway. Alone, Velma laments her loneliness on her Tumblr blog when she gets a tip in her ask box about a mystery, so she calls the gang, though she's annoyed by Daphne always bringing up how in love she is. Shaggy is busy as well and hangs up on her, so she decides to take this mystery on alone, borrowing one of Daphne's family boats. Out at sea, Velma hears the voice of a siren who begins to sweet-talk her, explaining she knows her well from her blog. Revealing herself to be a mermaid, the siren named Amy begs Velma to trust her and help before it's too late and she's caught. Later, Velma keeps checking her messages for something from Amy when she hears a knock and finds her at the window. Velma cheerfully blogs that a special friend came to see her as she logs off and asks Amy what she needs. Before they can do anything, however, her mom starts knocking at the door wanting to meet the special friend she just blogged about. Velma hides Amy in the bathroom as her mom opens the door with her key, though when she checks inside, there's nobody there. Having been tied up by those chasing Amy, Velma reveals that she knows her and was her source for the mystery's info.
But she's my secret special friend, so don't any of you think about stealing her. That was awkward.
Having solved the mystery, Velma looks over to Amy only to be horrified by seeing she's not only a human in a costume, but kissing the scientist they saved, her husband. Velma is heartbroken again, and Amy tries to explain that she was desperate, so Velma asks her how she knows her. She reveals she reads her blog and is a fan, and Velma asks if she's going to stay in touch. She says she will if she wants her to, and Velma tries to act cool, though she obviously does. At creepy spooky Terrorland, hoping to save it from the Manticore, the gang runs into Varcie again, as well as her father, who owns the park. Varcie's nickname Hot Dog Water is used by Velma against her, and we finally get an explanation from her father, who says he recycles their water from the hot dogs occasionally to save money, though Varcie says they don't have to explain themselves. We find out she and Velma are old rivals from the science fair circuit, though Velma always beats her, and Varcie's days of competing might be over if the gang can't solve the mystery. She continues to look down on the gang as they fail to solve what's going on. Following another attack, her dad decides to shut the park down for good, which she agrees with so nobody else gets hurt, though Fred insists they try again. They finally catch it and once unmasked reveal Varcie. Proclaiming her intellect to be far higher than Velma's, she's not surprised she hasn't figured out why she did it yet. Equally to Velma's lack of surprise, on a night without a date, Varcie explains her plan hoping to close the park, melt down the steel from the rides which she found she could turn into super helium, and sell it for a fortune, finally showing up Velma. She's taken away, and a fortune teller says her plan will be foiled by meddling kids. Later, thanks to some busy traffic, Shaggy falls on top of Velma and apologizes, though she says he doesn't need to move. Embarrassed, he asks if this means she wants to be friends again, and she says maybe, though Scooby falls on top of them and makes it awkward again. The two go out alone for a coffee date, and Shaggy says he missed her, and us, which she agrees with. They almost hold hands, but are interrupted by her mom. Telling the others they'll be there later, Velma stops Shaggy to talk. She says she's been thinking about what happened earlier, and he's excited, but she reveals she doesn't have the same feelings for him anymore. She asks to be friends, and leaves him brokenhearted this time instead. Later, Daphne asks if she had any trust issues when dating Shaggy, and she reminds her that she was left for a dog, only for him to want her again and be sent back to his dog. So, a few. After finding out Velma figured out Angel Dynamite's true identity and didn't tell them, the gang starts to distrust her, and her relationship with the gang is harmed yet again as tensions were already high. After finding out the truth of his father, Fred dissolves Mystery Incorporated, and Daphne blames Velma for not saying anything sooner as their parents take them away, ending her arc in the first season as everyone separates. As we pick up in the second season, Velma reunites with Shaggy, Scooby, and Fred after they escape.
Oi, where was this affection when we were dating?
Velma explains she didn't care the town was being destroyed at first or about mystery solving, which Fred correctly assumes was because of them leaving her behind. But eventually she realized she had to help and couldn't do it alone, so she got the gang back together as best she could. After a fight against Crybaby Clown, for the first time they let the bad guy get away because Daphne refused to join them again, and the team isn't the same without the missing piece. In Russia, Velma has meanwhile found her own missing piece. She and Marcie go deep undercover into the Baba Yaga exhibit in search of something, now working for Mr. E, the series antagonist. Back in Crystal Cove, Velma's excited to introduce Marcie properly to her friends, and she asks Velma to officially call her Marcie. With the idea of a new Daphne, Velma brings her out, and she explains she got out of prison early for redesigning the prison's security system. Velma agreed to take her under her wing as part of her probation, and tells them her real name. Scooby likes how she smells, and she offers them some candy she made in prison, so they excitedly accept her to Velma's delight. Marcie overhears on the radio that the Baba Yaga house is attacking and seems like something they should investigate, which Velma agrees would be a good training opportunity. Shaggy and Scooby give Marcie some advice about finding clues, but Velma grabs her hand and takes her away where they find a real clue, the house. Marcie asks if Mr. E mentioned this, but it seems completely unrelated, though Velma says they should remain vigilant, only for the house to attack and run off. Hearing someone was abducted, Velma drags Marcie off to call Mr. E, and he warns them that their jobs depend on this, which Scooby overhears. Inside the house, they discover one of the planspheric disc pieces Mr. E sent them to find, though they're caught in the act. Velma explains she's only doing this to stop the evil Professor Pericles from getting the discs for whatever he's planning, insisting she's on their side. Outside, Marcie realizes the fluid being left behind is the same they used at the park, helping with the mystery. After being turned down by Daphne again, they reveal they figured out where to go next thanks to the clue, and solved the mystery. Velma says she knew it would be good to have Marcie around, and Marcie says she's really happy and they make a great team. They drop Marcie off, and inside, waiting in the dark, sits Mr. E. He's decided they can't trust Velma anymore, and she's to remain as his eyes and ears, not as their friend. Starting with this episode, Daphne is removed from the opening theme, and replaced with Marcie, who lovingly holds a photo of Velma to her chest, and she also replaces her under the title. Velma brings up the Crybaby Clown attacks happening again, but everyone's distracted.
Doesn't anyone care about mystery solving anymore?
I care. You still got me.
After more attacks, Velma and Marcie are able to create a tracking device to find the clown, and they make chase. As they think they've captured him, they realize it's Daphne and she has a tracking device on her. Back home, Velma and Marcie exhaust their resources but still can't find anything. After a lot of work, they finally unmask the clown as Daphne's celebrity boyfriend, and Fred invites her back, but Velma looks over and realizes Marcie might not have a place anymore. Shaggy and Scooby stuff a bunch of food down Marcie's throat, and she asks what this is about, looking to Velma for answers. She tries to explain but doesn't have to finish. Marcie walks out the door and Velma stops her, saying she fought for her to stay, and Marcie says she knew things were temporary.
It's just, I never really had a friend before, and I was hoping you would put our friendship before Mystery Incorporated, but I guess not. See you around.
Out of sight, Marcie calls up Mr. E to confirm she was thrown away just like he said, so she sides with him, saying she has Velma right where she wants her. Mr. E later calls Velma, telling her a team without Marcie is a mistake, but as he says maybe she doesn't want to save her friends or the town, she angrily hangs up. Later at a party, Shaggy is heartbroken that Scooby chose a new girl dog over him, which Velma sees as rightful payback. She looks over and sees Marcie walk in, and the two wave to each other. Later, trying to take down the Dark Lilith, who's trying to steal their planspheric disc piece they just found, Velma looks up as she smells something familiar, and under the torn leg she sees some recognizable stockings. She chases after her, calling out her name, and Marcie unmasks herself. Still working for Mr. E, she utilized her old costume and put her new plan in motion, relying on Fred's traps to get the disc piece. She tells her she's glad Velma recognized her, and so is Velma, asking how this ends.
Here. Friendship should always come first, and, well, you're the only friend I've ever had.
What about Mr. E? He'll hunt you down and destroy you.
He'll have to catch me first. See you around, Velma Dinkley.
And so Marcie disappears into the sunset, choosing Velma over Mr. E after all. A bunch happens after that, Professor Pericles using the disc to end the world and all, and to lure the gang out to him, Pericles has Marcie brought out, revealing that they captured her and says they'll only let her go if they come down. The gang unlocks the gate for him, but as he's about to fly in, Marcie breaks free and grabs him, telling his robot she'll kill him if they move. Having overheard everything he's planned, she tells the gang to go do what they have to do to stop this at all costs. Velma pleads with her not to stay, but she tells her the world needs her.
Don't worry about me, V. I'll see you when this is over.
Marcie tries her best to hold them off, but they're able to knock her down and back her up against a wall.
Come on, Scooby. We have to keep going.
Long story short, the gang save the day and the universe is reset, where everything wronged is set right, including Marcie's death. Confused by all of this, Velma asks Marcie what's going on as they hang out on her bed. However, Marcie reveals it's almost time for this year's science event, which they've always won together in this universe, as she reminds her. Velma realizes what must have happened and runs off to tell the gang.
That's my girl.
And so, Marcie and Velma are officially gay girlfriends in this universe. Thusly ends Mystery Incorporated, as Velma ends her story riding off with her friends to start her life over anew, now in a relationship actually fulfilling for her. So, now we've broken down the details of Velma's 2 relationship arcs across the series. Her relationship with Shaggy didn't fulfill her needs no matter how hard she tried, because it's hard to love someone that's never going to prioritize you or give you what you need, and sometimes the piece is never going to fit if it wasn't made for the puzzle. In contrast, instead of friends to lovers to friends again, Velma went from enemies to lovers with her longtime rival Marcie, where she finally found someone that actually fulfills her the way Shaggy never did. So why did Velma's journey that ends in Varcie work? Velma's main problem is her anxious attachment style that Shaggy only aggravates. Someone with this attachment style will have difficulty trusting others, as she does frequently with Shaggy, and they'll have low self-worth, as we see her suffer with throughout her first arc especially. They'll have worries that their partner is going to abandon them, which we see in Velma as she fears constantly that Shaggy's going to replace her with his dog, and he does, only reinforcing that fear. They crave closeness and intimacy, which we see her try to project onto Shaggy to no avail throughout her first arc. They'll be overly dependent in a relationship, feeling highly emotional, impulsive at times, unpredictable, and moody. Obviously, this fits Velma's thoughts and actions in her relationship with Shaggy perfectly. They'll need frequent reassurance that people still care about them, which Velma expresses as she asks Shaggy to do this for her continuously when she gets anxious, and they'll be overly sensitive to a partner's actions and moods. Shaggy's moods and actions toward her as he tries to hide the relationship or ignores and pushes her away in favor of spending time with Scooby or the whole gang instead feed into these feelings for her. People frequently say Velma's feelings and actions in her arc with Shaggy make no sense and she's just being a I saw a popular YouTube video about that just the other day, but as someone that also has an anxious attachment style and has experienced all of this firsthand myself, Velma's pain is very real. Is it a little exaggerated for a television series portrayal, often to comedic effect? Yes, but it's also relatable and true, and sometimes when you're terrified of losing your partner for so many different reasons out of your control, you desperately hold on longer than you should just so you don't have to go through the pain you imagine it will bring, even if you know they aren't right for you. Velma needed someone that would choose her, put her first above friends or a literal dog, consistently give her the attention she needs and deserves, follow through on promises and commitments instead of letting something always come up like Shaggy manages, and encourage her to be aware of herself in a healthy way to get past her anxiety. Shaggy was a crappy boyfriend, and no matter what, Velma was right to not go back to someone that treats her as and makes her feel like a second choice. We see Velma finally realize something about herself in the Amy episode, but even then she still experiences the same anxieties and hurt from another loss. And when Velma finally looks back at her relationship with Shaggy, even has that chance to go back a few days later, she realizes that no, this wasn't good for me. You aren't going to give me what I need and deserve, and she lets him down in a mature way, showing her growth. It's after everyone she called a friend abandoned her at the end of the first season that she ends up with Marcie. With no one else to rely on or talk to like before, she gives her a chance to get close for the first time, and things just fit. In all the ways Shaggy was just never right for her, Marcie is there for her, understands her, and isn't afraid to give her that physical intimacy she needs, to the point that Velma effortlessly doesn't have to even worry about things like whether or not she's going to leave her for an animal. And despite being given that option at the risk of her own life, Marcie ultimately does choose Velma over abandoning and betraying her because that's what's more important to her. The two of them are intellectually a match, and also a match for emotional maturity, the two most important things Shaggy could never offer. When Marcie sees Velma get into one of her smart, sciencey moods, it makes her happy and proud. It says a lot that, in the perfect universe after the reset, the two of them are already in an established, healthy relationship, because being with Marcie is the perfect life, the happily ever after for Velma, the ending that she deserves for her new beginning. And for queer people especially, I'm sure this experience and growth, trying to make something fit that's never going to until you finally accept yourself and start making choices that are good for you, is something all too familiar. I know it is for me. They couldn't give us anything explicitly open for a show being made in the early 2010s, but what they did give us between these two is pretty fantastic. And so we've reached the end of the journey. Whether you loved or hated Mystery Incorporated's Velma before, I hope we're all a little closer to the same page by this point in the video. Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated has been my favorite entry in the Scooby franchise for over a decade, and I can't see that changing anytime soon. I once blocked a Scooby TikToker just for saying they hated it. I'm petty like that. The legacy the series holds is only going to continue to grow with time, just as it has these last few years already, and Velma's queer evolution is only one of many reasons why this show is so special. A sad part of history it holds is being the final television appearance of Mindy Cohn as the voice of Velma. To many people, especially those my age, she is the definitive voice of Velma, and when I think of the character, it's always going to be her voice I hear, and the performance she gives in this series across Velma's journey, putting her trust in the team to get her there, is utterly fantastic. Cohn, a proud supporter of the queer community herself, stepped away for a bit in her successful battle against cancer soon after the show, expecting Velma to be waiting for her after, but in the next TV series she was replaced, and despite being promised to continue the role in films, she was replaced in those by 2015 as well. When Matthew Lillard expressed his heartbreak over being recast as Shaggy and Scoob, she shared her pain she still feels over the loss of Velma in this tweet. "I'm never going to stop missing her in the role, but if Mystery Incorporated is the final series we'll ever hear her in, she gave us one memorable goodbye."
So when it showed back up on Netflix and then suddenly we're being bombarded by praise and people are putting it on top 10 lists. I think one list even said it was the best iteration of Scooby-Doo that had ever been done. You know, it was like, oh, okay, so we weren't crazy. We really did make something that people could enjoy. It just took them a while to get there. That has been very, very satisfying because usually you do these things, show ends, and you move on to the next thing and you don't really hear about it. I've got tons of shows I've worked on that I've never heard about again. But Mystery Incorporated, we did this show over 10 years ago. You know, it's very humbling, but it's just to know that you created something that outlasted its original time in the sun and that people continue to discover it and enjoy it and it holds up. That to me has been the most satisfying aspect of the show, is that its enduring legacy of, you know, entertaining people who continue to find it and really get into it. When something you work on touches people this many years later to the point where they actually reach out, which is a big deal.
Are you also a huge fan of the show? How do you feel about Velma's queer representation in this series? I love talking about this show, so let's do it in the comments. For more of Mitch Watson's revealing interview about the creation of the show, listen to the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo podcast, which is linked in the description. Like this video so I know you liked it, it's important. Subscribe to see the next video. We're putting this one back on the shelf and pulling out another series this time instead. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Tumblr, etc. at Legend of Justice. I'm more active there, especially Twitter. And if you're a fellow gay person, hope you have a great Pride Month. Bye!